Let's talk about the movie itself, how it got made. I saw on IMDb, and I know you can't always trust exactly what IMDb says,
The
but
Wikipedia of the film industry.
yeah, it's a according to that there was a one it was a $1 million budget. Is that around accurate?
I'll let Soul answer that one because he's a little closer to the
Well,
finances here.
I mean, typically we don't talk specifically about budgets in the indie world, especially just because, we work our butts off to try to make a movie at as small budget as we possibly can, and then we go out and we try to make sales with it or make money from it. And if we say, oh, it costs $10, and then somebody's going to give us $10 for it, and then nobody makes any money and nobody does anything for it. And if we say it costs, but all that said, we were a little bit under $1 million. That was a slightly generous estimation there.
So I've already learned something. That's amazing. So I see what you did there. Hey, listen. Hey, it's a lemonade stand. It costs $2 to run, not 50 cents. I got you. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
As in,
Yeah, and I would just add there that I think I would just echo what Sol is saying and say that a lot of people worked, for example, for no salaries, including myself, and a lot of people put in a lot of sweat equity. So that's where I think if you watch the film and you look at the production value of the film, it feels even higher than $1 million, right? Like we have that scene where Susan Bro visits literally the Senate chamber and gets to meet AOC and Talia Rashid, and she's interacting with them, and we have all that footage, and that was like taken by a cinematographer who has access to the Capitol building. So it's some of these kinds of interactions that we were able to capture, even though it's very much a labor of love. The production value shows on screen. So I think
Definitely.
that's larger than life, even though it is very much is an indie production. So I just thought I would say that because a lot of energy and time went into it, even though it wasn't necessarily dollars spent, but it was kind of paid in kind. It was a labor of love.
yeah,
I,
no, that's we both are on the low level end of independent filmmakers, so I totally appreciate sweat equity, and I mean it had to be costly to go across the country. I mean it's like a cross country documentary following multiple people.
I was going to ask a question here real quick, and I want to say this. Let me ask you this, because it's kind of hard to tell. Because again, you have one family who's traveling across 50 states. You have Steven, which after we did our research, we found out how much he's involved in trying to bring people together, bridge them together. How long did the actual production take itself?
It was about 2 years, 2.5 years, essentially. And we were starting editing, maybe a year and a half into that. So you get to a certain place and you're like, oh, we really need this, or this is happening, and you have to go cover it, and then you have to kind of redo your edit in order to make it fit because we've got this new piece that we didn't know was going to be happening. And I mean, that's documentary filmmaking in a nutshell. It's like it's very different than narrative filmmaking where everything's scripted, and yeah, obviously there are adjustments and changes along the way, but with a documentary it's like you're following people, especially with something like this where there's 4 different storylines that we're really trying to keep track of these 4 different characters, or more like 5 different characters, all along the way throughout this whole time, and just kind of like gathering information about what they're doing, where they're going, who they're meeting, what's the latest thing that they're up to. And then you go out and you film whatever of it that you possibly can, whenever, wherever, however you can,
Mm-hmm.
and then try to bring it together and put it into a story. I mean, sure, we have aims and visions and ideas of what we want it to be, but you have to capture it. You have to go out there and you have to be there and to actually see what they do and they say and who they meet, and then kind of bring it all together. So yeah, it was a long process, and as most documentaries really are, but it was one that was just very organic in the sense that it was really just conversations. I mean, primarily with Ben. I mean, I got to give Ben so much credit for this movie. I mean, he got into this just pure passion out of like the desire to help bring people together in our country, and it just completely took over his world, and he devoted his life to it and just really pushed and was like the driving force in every aspect of this movie. And Raj and I are here to support and do whatever we can and add and how we can pull all the pieces together and make it happen, but Ben is like the heart that makes everything run. I've been friends with him for 20 years, and seeing him kind of really come full circle into the space of like doing stuff that is meaningful to him personally, as opposed to I'm a filmmaker, I need to go out there and I need to make something that everybody else in the world is going to love. And seeing him, really bring that back into what is important to him, it was really inspiring and something really beautiful for me to see and be a part of.
Me and him both said this. We looked at this and I said, at least for me personally, it's a documentary, but halfway through it, I don't feel like I'm watching a documentary because the cinematography is just so good. Especially, there's some shots with Steven running through the park. I'm like, what is this? Like, what do we watch? Like, it is like just visually, it just takes you like, man, this is really serious. So I just wanted to piggyback on what you guys said and show. I know how much passion you guys put into this. So I at least want to give you credit for that.
Yeah, I think just to add, Ben, this was Ben's first documentary, but Ben has done multiple features, including, features that have very high production value, that have 7-figure budgets, that are shot in foreign countries. Actually, I've known Ben for several years, and Ben and I started talking when he made Ashram a couple of years ago, which was kind of like his big kind of indie thriller in India. And then he made a film called Watchlist, which was a hard-hitting drama, a crime drama about the drug trade in the Philippines, and about a mother who is forced to become an assassin in order to basically get the protection for her children from the corrupt cops. And it's like based on it's like based on like real life events that are happening in the Philippines right now under the new kind of regime there. After I saw that film, I was like, this guy knows how to deliver multi-million-dollar production value on indie budgets, and he's done kind of like these very, very intense, gritty landscape dramas that have action sequences and intense choreography. So it was after seeing these films, I was like, he's going to make a beautiful documentary. And I think in the documentary, you see some of his skill and finesse, where you have Stephen Olakara running around and he's like running up, he's running up to the statue of MLK and he's running up the steps to the Lincoln statue. And it's like these slow-mo shots. And it's like, wow, this is not a documentary. This is something else. So we definitely were going for that. And I think that's Ben's experience and style kind of coming into play there.
Yeah, a lot of the times documentaries get so information heavy, which is important, but they lose that cinematic value. And there was a very strong cinematic quality to all the shots in this. So the film focuses on 4 stories, like you were talking about. You have Susan Bro, the mother of Heather Heyer, David and Aaron Leverton, the Republican family who traveled cross country in the RV. Stephen Olakara, the founder of the Millennial Action Project, and Greg Orman, the independent candidate running for Senate to represent Kansas. I was curious when watching it what was the process like deciding who the focal figures of the movie would be?
Yeah, that was a journey in and of itself, because the original version, the kind of original cut of the film that we did actually had more storylines in there. So we had these kind of 4 kind of core main everyday American storylines: Susan Bro, Stephen Olakara, the Levertons, and Greg Orman, right? These are like very emotional, very personal stories. And then we also had actually sprinkled throughout the film kind of luminaries in the field of polarization. We had a professor from Stanford who was like opening up the first depolarization lab. We had, the CEO of All Sides, which is a tech company that aggregates news from all sources, all into the spectrum. They have right-wing news and left-wing news, and they bring it all together on one portal. So we had all these kind of more academically focused luminaries in the film too. And there were probably, a good 12, 13 characters in there originally. And while it was a really, really solid film, I think what we realized was the heart and soul of the picture and what makes you cry and what makes you engage and what makes you invested is these 4 stories. Right? Not to discount the amazing work that a lot of these folks are doing, but it was these 4 human stories that made us cry, that made us laugh, that inspired us. So we kind of narrowed the focus a little bit to focus on these 4 journeys. But originally we had many more characters in the film.
Was there one story, either you or Sol can answer this, was there one story that didn't make it that maybe one of you guys would have maybe wanted to focus on rather than the core 4?
I would say that there were actually 6, and that's why what we've done is we've created a supplemental miniseries called Everyday Heroes, and it's these 3 to 4 minute little vignettes about each of these 6 characters. And right now we're kind of exploring strategy. We're talking to a couple of different news outlets, and we're trying to see how do we place this kind of supplemental miniseries. But there were these 6 amazing stories that kind of turned into these standalone pieces. And it's a little mini series that we're cultivating called Everyday Heroes that can hopefully help cross promote the film and can be placed on some kind of a news outlet.
Yeah, let me just add into that, I mean, we started with those 4 storylines that were, you know, really inspiring and incredible, and we're always looking for more, and we're always out there trying to find more interesting people, interesting stories, things that other people are saying. We found tons of them, like Raj had mentioned, and we used a lot of them, but we always kept coming back to these 4 stories that we had been following from the beginning. They were all the 4 original storylines that, you know, were chosen. And it was just that sort of thing that was just like, it just felt right. It just always felt right. Throughout the edit, we'd always add in more characters, and we're like, let's go back to this core and bring that back and really keep it and make it about these, you know, they're all everyday people, but these 4, you know, characters really kind of pinpoint a variety of different people within the United States that we felt like all had a voice to say, that were individual voices. Their voices could speak to a specific demographic of people within our country.
The Reunited States premiered, it was the closing night film at the Woods Hole Film Festival, and it'll also be going on to CineQuest Film Festival in September, United Nations Association Film Festival in October. What has the reception have been like at the Woods Hole Film Festival?
Yeah, it was great. Just, it was such a resounding and overwhelming emotional response. I mean, we were getting personal messages on Facebook. We were getting emails. The festival director was super welcoming and warm about our film, and we had a lot of conversations with her about it in terms of how to best place it. So yeah, the reception at Woods Hole was great, but I think what was even cooler was the reception across the board at all the festivals that we went to was amazing. So we won the Humanitarian Award at the Rhode Island Film Festival. We won the Best Documentary Award at Atlanta DocuFest. We were in competition at various different festivals. We were the opening night film at CineQuest. And again, everywhere the film played, we always got these very emotional responses and messages, including in some cases from festival directors saying, "I love your film." We've had film festivals come back to us, you know, after the election or during the insurrection and say, "This country needs your film right now. Can we please feature your film as a part of a special series that we're doing in February and March as a part of trying to feature, you know, topics about civic engagement and about the kind of health of our politics." So it was such an overwhelming response, and I think it was heartening, right? Because as independent filmmakers, you make a film and you're kind of sitting with it, and you go through this phase where you apply the film to festivals and you're like not sure if it's going to bounce, if it's going to resonate, even if it gets in, are people going to like it, is it going to be seen? So we kind of went through those ups and downs a little bit, but it was really heartening to kind of see towards the end of it, we had an incredible festival run, an incredible response. The documentary won awards, so that was really gratifying.
Why don't you subscribe? It'll last longer.